Hey everyone, my name is Nick Lambert, I'm the CEO of Doc, and welcome to our latest live event. The question that we pose to our esteemed panelists today is, can decentralized identity be the future of digital trust? These esteemed guests that I referred to are Charlie Walton. Charlie, I should be upfront and say Charlie's an advisor to Doc Labs, but he's also the principal at the Agosti Group and also the former SVP of Identity at both Avast and Mastercard. And we also have Martin Kuppinger, who's the founder and principal analyst at KuppingerCole. How are you both? Thank you for joining us and making the time.
Great. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
So this is going to be a really great discussion, one that I'm really excited about, particularly because it's in a field that it feels a little bit closer to home for us and decentralized identity, which I mean the ability for individuals to control and manage their own identity. It's emerged as one of the most promising, but also probably one of the most complex things to happen in the world of digital identity, and we'll get into some of those complexities as we go through the event today. But it has major implications from kind of more typical things that we'd associate with identity to things like identity verification, but also into even how we access systems and identity access management and some of those topics. So we'll dig into those a little bit as well. But as we see adoption for decentralized identity growing, and I definitely believe it is. There's been people that have been waiting a long time for this adoption to happen, but we really are starting to see it. And with a lot of the regulations coming our way, specifically eIDAS 2, I think we're really going to start to see this accelerate. And as that happens, can decentralized identity deliver on this promise? Who stands to benefit the most from this new technology? Is it users? Is it businesses? Is it both? And can it scale, and who is going to pay for all of this new tech? I don't know if you guys want to jump in and say a quick couple lines of introduction before we get going. Charlie, do you want to start, please?
Great stuff. Thanks, Nick. First off, really appreciate the privilege to join this forum. You and the team of Doc have done a great job, I'd say, on behalf of the industry overall. So kudos and thanks. As Nick's mentioned, I've been in the field for quite some years, starting probably way back 2012 in the area of digital identity. And I'd say the frustrating bit has been I don't think I've licked it, and we've not all licked it yet, which has made it a continued challenge. I think there's a lot of promise, and things are looking like they're getting closer to reality. So it's a real good time for this session. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Charlie. And Martin, over to you. And Martin, like I said, please feel free. I believe you've got an event coming up fairly soon that maybe people listening to this webinar might want to know about.
Yeah, so first, I'm Martin Kuppinger, one of the founders of KuppingerCole Analysts. We are an analyst firm specializing in identity management, digital identity, cybersecurity. I'm in the field of identity, I'd say, since around 1989, starting with early NetWare and LAN manager versions. So really, really a long time. And I believe that decentralized identity is really one of the biggest things, maybe the biggest fundamental change we are seeing in this for decades. So on our event, we are hosting the European Identity Conference in Berlin, which runs May 6th to May 9th, and which is the premier identity gathering in Europe. So we expect to have about 1,500 people or so there, and we'll discuss both enterprise IAM and decentralized identity. So it's really a large event, 5 or 6 parallel tracks, a lot of very renowned speakers, and surely worth being there. All the information available at our website and easily to find EIC or European Identity Conference.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Thank you to you both. Structure for today is going to be familiar to those that tend to listen in on a regular basis. I'll have a chat with the guys for kind of 40 minutes or so, running through a range of different topics. And then if you're listening online in the audience through Riverside, as usual, please let us know where you're listening from. I see some in the chat have already done that. Thank you for doing that. And also, that's the same place you would post and ask questions. Francisco will curate those and we'll ask them to Martin and Charlie at the end. So thanks. And without further ado, we will get moving. So first question is over to you, Martin. Martin, we attended, Doc Labs as a group attended EIC in Berlin. I think it was late May last year. And the opening keynote, which I still remember, you're very, very optimistic about decentralized identity, and it created almost a buzz across the conference, I think, for the rest of the event, really. Has your outlook changed at all over the last year? Has your enthusiasm been dampened in any way? Or are you reinforced in your beliefs and are you optimistic for the impact of decentralized identity?
So I'm very optimistic that decentralized identity will become very, very relevant. I think in some areas it already is, and I think when I take your title of today's talk, if you turn it around, I think it becomes very clear. One of the aspects becomes very clear. You're asking, can decentralized identity be the future of digital trust? I think what we have learned over the past decades is siloed, centralized identity can't be the foundation of digital trust. Millions of stolen passwords, hacks against the silos, it doesn't work. I think if you're realistic, the siloed approach isn't working really well. So if you have decentralized identities, you at least get much better in this area, that the risk is limited to an individual identity, not to millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of identities in a silo. So from that perspective, I think that is a good reason, starting more from a cybersecurity angle. But I also think that there are so many use cases that are not solved well. I think everyone who is traveling with us feels we need to have something where we are much better able to share parts of our identity when we're purchasing tickets for public transport, for opera, for museums, hotel check-ins, all that stuff you do, a ski pass, whatever. All these things could become much easier, and a lot of other things in our life. So the potential is huge, also in business. And this huge potential, the fact that there are compelling business cases, will help it. I think the challenge is that things are, for me, sometimes moving too slow. I would love to see more innovation, more speed in the entire thing, more openness. I have a bit of a fear that we will see, for instance, in the UDI wallet, a few birth defects, which we could have avoided, which might be just a consequence of too many parties playing into that. But we will overcome it. So overall, I'm very positive.
Thanks, Martin. So you're positive, but it could almost be like a touch of realism about the speed at which we'll start to see maybe mainstream adoption. It sounds like possibly. Charlie, I know you've written a lot, and obviously we speak fairly regularly, and I know you kind of started off with very much in decentralized identity at Mastercard, but I know on your own career journey, you're very much an aficionado of decentralized identity as well, and you've written a lot about digital trust infrastructure. If people haven't read some of your posts on LinkedIn, I definitely encourage to go back and read a series that you posted a few months back. It's definitely very eye-opening. What's your view kind of specifically on decentralized identity, Charlie, and what are the kind of sectors and use cases that you're maybe most excited about and where you think there's the biggest chance of disruption happening?
So first of all, Nick, I'd say I'm obviously a big fan of decentralized identity. It's the right sort of paradigm. It's the right model. It's brilliant. It's more natural with respect to how I think about dealing with stuff in the physical world, where I've got my wallet in my back pocket and I pull out my driver's license or my library card and I'm able to present it and go. So it's something that people ought to be really, really familiar with. I'd say that the second thing, though, is that we've had it's a very hard approach to kind of drop this into the digital world as it's wired today. We've got a legacy that is siloed. The world works, right? And in contrast to Martin, I agree with a great deal of what you're saying, but the world does work. We've got our frustrations, but the world's working. The world's not broken. I don't have to implement this tomorrow. And that's a bit of a problem and a bit of a drag, and probably a bit of my frustration in having been at this for a dozen years, and we're not there. I'm with you, Martin, that things are going a little slower than we'd like.
But okay, go ahead.
And I would say that application service providers, I'd say you turn to Acme whatever, Acme Share Ride Company. They don't have an alternative to plug into today. So I'd say commercially, tell me where the solution is, baby, and I'll plug in. So I'd say we've got services. They sort of work. We probably get a B- in the world. I'd say the industry as well has grown an awful lot, and it's at a good matured stage right now. But I'd say that there was a misplacement of some of that enthusiasm early on to think that issuers, holders, and verifiers made this work. And I just believe that's been incredibly wrong. There's a fourth actor that's really, really important to be reflected. And I think we've got some current thinking along those lines. So big fan. Sadly, we haven't really lived up to it. Now, when we think about the positive signs and the places where this goes, certainly the adoption of mobile driver's licenses, the adoption of age checking in some jurisdictions, the European community moving, all really, really good. I'd say the inherent ability to combat identity fraud, get to lower transactional fraud, better experiences, when we pay is really, really key. Privacy becomes all the more important, and where we're at with AI right now just calls for this more and more and more. Regarding disruption, I would say that the current identity verification community, those that are making this market today, could become either disruptors or they might become disruptees. I think there's a real opportunity for those organizations to make the right migration. That's where the supply side of the market is today. So they're really a natural to begin partnering with some innovative companies in the decentralized space.
And thank you, Charlie. That was really insightful, and definitely keen to dig into that fourth actor that you mentioned, which we'll kind of get into. Martin, I think you were kind of keen to come back. I don't know if there's anything in what Charlie was saying that you were just trying to counter or agree with.
Yeah, I think take mobile driver's license, or take the UDI wallet discussion about, we have a tool for delivering a verified identity. That story is nice, but just nice. It is not a vision. I think what we need in this industry is more vision. So what are the really big things we will solve? For a consumer, ease travel for a consumer by having a way where you don't need to care about so many different things. I just needed recently, because I'll travel to London soon, I needed to apply for this new, whatever it's called, thing. Yes, why can't I do that directly with all the other stuff, hotel booking, all those things? Or look at... that is, for instance, take the UDI wallet. They had very early. They had a large-scale pilot which was about automating the entire loan process. It went down to opening a bank account. That is from great to nice. Going back, because when you automate the loan process, I talked in my EIC keynote about last year about this. Then we're talking about hundreds of millions and more of savings for large banks every year for the AML and KYC process. But we would need way more verifiable credentials than just the ID in that. We would need all the information about which real estate do you own, your salary statements, etc., etc. All you need as a proof. So we would need to think this much bigger. And this is missing, I believe. And this is where we need to work on. We need to think much bigger and tell a visionary story that is going way beyond the use cases we look at today.
Is there a bit of a difference there between, I'm kind of just playing devil's advocate, and I think I'm wondering if what you're talking about, Martin, is, like you said, the vision of telling the story, making things markedly better than what they are today, not just nice, but like significantly better. And Charlie, I think, like, from what I took from what you were saying, there's the business practicalities around this, and why should existing identity players, incumbents, want to actually start to engage with this? Like, tell the vision story. For me, it tends to work really well with individuals and consumers, and maybe strategic teams inside companies. But actually, there's a difference there, and we need to offer practical ways today, this quarter, next quarter, for these companies to generate revenue and pay for this technology. Would you agree that that's the slight difference, the way that you and Martin are coming at this, or do you see that differently?
Well, listen, at the end of the day, I'd say people have got a series of challenges today, but they've grown accustomed to them, and they grumble and they moan about logging in and dealing with passwords, and on occasion, providing some identity data, or pulling out a plastic card or whatever. But people are sort of conditioned to the way the world is working right now. Now, the question is, and I think I agree with Martin, can you relate how, making a payment with my Citibank Visa card could be, or MasterCard could be all the better, where all I do is, whether I'm at the point of sale, the ATM, the kiosk, the car, using my watch, using my phone, using my PC, I'm just presenting my face and off I go, right? And that becomes the way I unlock credentials that I've got located somewhere. I'm not, going to point to a design, but in other words, being able to relate how paying with identity might be different, or how I might travel with identity, where it becomes this integral new capability for me, or it begins to deal with questions or worries that I've got about the integrity of content out there. Is that really Martin talking to me, or is it a Martin bot that's just full of BS? So I think absolutely agree with Martin, this view of vision of what can be, and it gets to another important point. To the extent that this stuff is all supply side driven, you can just guarantee it ain't going to go anywhere. So this stuff has got to be driven on the application use side: financial services, travel, health, government services, content. That's where we've got to get to, and have those organizations start experimenting and designing new journeys for people, right? That's the way to get there.
Yeah, that's a nice segue into the next question, actually, Martin, because I think that like what Charlie's kind of articulating there is really around obviously having demand side for this tech. And what do you think are the barriers that we're seeing right now? Are you thinking that enterprises are scared by decentralized identity, or does it just seem like there's a lot of new things to learn? What do you think that are some of the barriers to demand side companies working in this space that's holding them back from kind of diving into this full head steam?
I think one thing is that frequently they just don't know what exists and what it could deliver to them. So I think the knowledge outside of a relatively big bubble, but outside of a bubble, it's still a bubble, is very low. So I think there's a lot of need for education, for telling the story, for that demand side. So again, and I think this relates to what Charlie said and what I said before. It's the story, because this is, I think, one element that is, I would say, missing. The other thing is, so I think part of that is also that when we talk about this, a lot of people, we tend to talk about relatively technical, sometimes very, very technical and geeky concepts. We make it really hard for someone from the outside to understand the value immediately. And a story which you can't put into an elevator speech, 30 words, is not a good story. We need an elevator pitch for that. The 30 words everyone can use to convince the demand side about the value of that. The other element is, what I hear way too frequently is, this is disruptive. Hey, if we say it's disruptive, we're scaring people away. Because it's disruptive yes, in a positive sense, because it allows us to do new things. It is enabling us. But when we use this term, and it's frequently used, then it's usually perceived in the first moment as something which says it breaks what you have. It doesn't break. And I think we need to educate people. It doesn't break what they have. So we have basically another better means of verification. We deliver the verified identity. We have a simpler means of authentication in many use cases. We can provide information into existing business processes, but the backend business processes, we can then improve them. We can make them better, but they don't break at the beginning. And I think this must be our story. It opens really new horizons, new potentials, but it doesn't break what they have. They can gradually improve and then enable new business processes, new business models, entire new businesses by relying on the technology. This must be our story, a positive story about the incredible potential behind that decentralized identity unveils.
Yeah, really interesting. And Charlie, I think like I mentioned at the start, and the kind of this links back to Martin's point, where you wrote I guess a kind of blueprint for a decentralized identity is the way I try and describe it. And you made reference to this fourth thing that's required. I maybe could have asked you to just expand on that as part of the answer here, as part of this kind of global digital trust layer. I think what you were thinking about there, and maybe had articulated it as almost like some kind of approved like MasterCard or Visa symbol, where if you see that, you know you're all good. If you're kind of trying to make a payment within that store or within that vendor. So can you expand a little bit on what you think that fourth thing is to make us kind of trust digital identity in this global trust layer? And what do you think it would take for such a thing to gain traction globally, in your view?
Yeah, it's a good one, a rather complex one, and I think an important one. So, tied up in this notion of common acceptance, Mark, I maybe relate my view. I think Martin pointing to this as well, like network. So you'd say this fourth entity. What's the fourth entity to do? I think the problem is we're trying to get people and identity verification providers and customers to all gravitate to do something new. Now, they're kind of all saying, I'm in and if you're in, and you're in if I'm in, and we're in if they're in, but it's not inherently moving very quickly, right? So it strikes me certainly that a market maker is function number one of a fourth piece. Let's call it the network or the scheme or the governance authority, the organization that sets the table for a commercial decentralized identity service, right? So if you thought about one way, and it's not the only way, but one way to get to this sort of layer, it's that sort of organization. It's really this acceptance mark is the embodiment of a UI UX construct, some handrails for people to know that credentials that I've got work within this network, much like historically we saw marks on ATM machines that said, well, this card can work at this location, right? That you've kind of got acceptance. So that's kind of the notion that you're much like the way I might log in with Google. So it's for discovery, for awareness, but also important that mark means something. It means something with respect to privacy and security and data practices that the Citibank that I think I'm interacting with, when I see their verifiable credential, I know it's the Citibank that's incorporated in New York City, that's a Fortune 500 big bank, that it's actually the city. It also means that there's regulatory compliance and legal support and consumer protections. Now, what would something like this take? It's hard and big. It's hard in the sense that it's got to be collaborative. We can't go off and just produce a network or a system like this and say, well, gee, SingPass is nice in Singapore, but need to replace that. We need to replace scheme A, B, and C. The Europeans are all wet. That's the wrong. No, 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 no. You got much that's going on. That's great work in the field around the globe that needs to be kind of stitched together. So it's the fact that you've got good progress. This needs to be kind of linked together. That network scale player needs to have a very large foundational vision and mission. Couldn't agree more, Martin, with you on the education bit. Needs to operate globally, needs to be locally relevant, needs to be capable of scale, of non-trivial investment, and has to deliver stakeholder value, the user, the identity provider, the customer, and the investor, the guy that's paying the bill. So you got to be holistic, self-sustaining. It's not an association. It's not a best practices organization. It's not a standards body. Those are all great places to get ideas on the table for something like this. But you're going to have to be commercially motivated for scale and for sustainability. Tough order. And it's got to be done not by boiling the ocean, but having the big multi-year vision and probably starting in an appropriate way. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Charlie. I was actually wondering as you're talking, Martin, I kind of wonder if it comes back to your point. You were almost looking for 30 words or whatever that actually can distill an idea and a concept. I was actually wondering, for you, does a brand mark almost do that job more succinctly than an elevator pitch?
So I think we need an elevator pitch, no doubt. I like what Charlie said. This is really great because this really made me thinking, and I think it the first time ever gave me an understanding of basically what a trust network really could be and should be. A term that has been around for long, and I always struggled with what does this term really mean. At the end of the day, I think that maybe Charlie and just thinking loud here, maybe it's easier than you fear here, because I think in this decentralized world based on standards, we can have multiple parties that basically say we are a trusted, or we are a source of certain verifiable credentials. And with that, you, for instance, already have maybe LinkedIn delivering some certain verifiable credentials that have a certain value in their context. You'll have the EUDI wallet that delivers a certain set of credentials that probably have a relatively high trust around the globe. And we will have others probably coming in like Apple or Google that will issue certain credentials. We may have whatever the PayPals of the world, but we also will have probably others that serve a certain part of that, like also the financial services, etc. And we can all bring them together in one or multiple wallets and exchange them then within the transaction. So maybe we have already a lot of players that are potentially able to deliver in their ecosystem, which is part of the broader sort of ecosystem that is served by decentralized identity, that already can deliver a certain brand. Just that you don't say, okay, I choose this or that credit card, but you say, I use these verifiable credentials that are from here, and these others are from here, and then they most likely will be accepted, maybe not, maybe yes. It probably also depends on the transaction, because at the end this will be, for what do you need it? When you do some simple things, you don't need a highly trusted level of assurance 3 or a level of identification level 3. High assurance of your identity. For most things, you don't need it. And so I think we probably can build a lot of this already based on which players we have in the market. And I like the idea of these logos, so to speak. So this picture of the ATM with these cards are accepted. I like this.
And what do you think? I mean, this is a kind of question to both of you guys, because it's kind of like, one that we're kind of dealing with now. Charlie, you kind of talked about how hard it was, and I think Martin was maybe trying to kind of step back from the ledge a little bit. But what do you think is still holding decentralized identity back? You can look at whether it's technical challenges, political, economic, or something else. Charlie, do you want to kind of jump in and give your views on really what it is? Maybe expand on some of the things that you've already said, please.
Yeah, what's sort of holding it back? I mean, I think it's about scale players getting out there and doing this, right? I mean, I think, listen, you take a look at use cases that have been out there. They've been dominantly inward country oriented. So that is, in a country, I'm doing something. They're tending to be niche and infrequently used things. And in a lot of cases, you're not having money flow through the context of that transaction. But when you think about the things that we do every day, you want to break this open. Can you imagine if you found an international player, a PayPal, an Uber, an Airbnb, another big multinational, multi-footprint company saying, well, that's the way I'm gonna deal with credentials coming and going. Now, when you think about it, we've all tried to get in by doing something contained and focused. Don't boil the ocean. Let's do this niche thing and prove it out. Okay, I've proven out that I can open up a bank account, or I can pay my taxes, or I can let the apartment. But what are the things that we do every day? You got to start getting scale for people. We consume digital content. We interact on social media. We digitally work. We message and communicate, and we shop and buy. And of all of these, you'd have to say that this shop and buy category is a pretty neat one. There's still lots of fraud out there. You still have cross-border problems. You've got growth and account-to-account based fraud. And all of this starts to get worse with AI and quantum compute coming, that is, in the hands of bad guys. So you'd sort of say, whether I'm in many different contexts of interacting and shopping and buying, it's a wonderful, wonderful use case where you could begin to see this technology put to wonderful, wonderful use. And if that were to occur, you're off to the races. So we'll put this in the category of boil in the ocean, and wouldn't it be grand if? But it seems to me, to break the ice on this, to really make a big step forward, it's a bold move by a big player.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, and you're right. So one of my criticisms for the European program is that at the end of the day, if you look at the large scale pilots, the majority is in some way government oriented. How many interactions do I have with my government every year? But how many interactions do I have, like you described, in my daily life use cases?
Yeah,
so we must serve these well. We must make this very simple. And I think an interesting point beyond fraud is, in e-commerce, we still have the drop-off and the churn challenge. So people not ending up with a purchase because something became too complicated or not coming back. That is something we definitely can simplify with a reusable identity. And
so, Mark, the other thing is you were speaking. I'm thinking about an analogy back to the days of digital music. And we were all in a very techie world, early stage devices. Napster and the whole bit. But what ended up happening with this 2001 moment, right? You had a company actually begin to roll out a cool device that people liked, an iPod, and a service where they could get content, iTunes, a set of record label deals, a business model that Apple pulled together that they invested in, and they turned this into a great thing for consumers. They were thinking just about the consumer, and they drove the whole thing out that way. We need a moment like that in this industry, yes. Right? And I'm not to say it's content or payment or whatever, but we need the moment like that, right? Some scale player making that type of move.
Yeah, agreed.
Interesting. And I think Apple were coming out with some announcements today as well around kind of trying to get payments. I think it's their kind of still their siloed approach, but I think hopefully we'd be optimistic that could be kind of more decentralized, but certainly great that a large player that has amazing pedigree is really embracing this technology, which is something for us all to be optimistic about. Kind of moving us a little bit more into, I think, probably more about sustainability for me as well. And one of the things that we're quite big on at Doc is really around the ability to create business models. The essential component, I think, in all of this that I think is often forgotten is we need to not only look after consumers, like you said, Charlie, the big moment for individuals. And Martin, we've talked a lot about kind of, consumer use cases and that really being a key focus. But we do also need to consider how businesses are going to adopt this and how they're going to basically pay for integrating these new systems and running them. And so is that something that you guys also feel like that's something that's been not talked about enough? And how key is this? I mean, do you think which business models do you see as being viable for scaling decentralized identity technology and wallets? Pass that over to you, maybe Charlie, in the first instance.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, this is technology that helps both with security. And I think as Martin talked about earlier, it opens up the possibility of new ways of interacting, new applications as well, right? And you'd say that the security play is something that those that are delivering services are going to have to pay for. And that's a continued thing through their digital life, right? As time has gone on, you're going to continue to need to make the payment for security to be relevant and protective. Then by way of new services, lots of ways I can go. Charlie can sign up and say, I want free services, but I'm going to pay for it with my data. Or I can say, I'm not going to pay for it with my data, but I'm willing to pay for it with my pocketbook, or there's some other bargain that I've got with a service provider. So I think the very, very fair approach, the approach that I think we begin to see is that the costs of this, right? And let's be honest. No one in the world is saying, I want identity services. What we're saying is, I want my Netflix. I want to make the payment. I don't want to stand in line. I want to go on the trip. Those are the things people want. And this technology makes it safer and easier and better. So it's a matter of bolting these costs into things that I'm paying for already. It's conceivable that we might find a user saying, this is so great. I'm able to protect my data, put all my travel life together into a form that's easy to manage, and I might pay a couple of bucks a month for that. And we could begin to see those sorts of models. I do believe there can be enough consumer value that not so much just the wallet, but it's the wallet with the smart agent, the smart processing, the value add that I get. That may be a thing I may be willing to pay for. So I think we are at an exciting time.
Yeah, and I think that it goes back to something I discussed with Nick just before that, before we started. I think there's, in some sense, there's probably a layered perspective you should take. There are wallets, plural. There will not be the wallet, there will be wallets. And also, by the way, at last year at the conference, Pramod Varma, the chief architect of Aadhaar in India, he said a very important sentence. He said, we are issuing to the holder, not to the wallet. So we should also give the holder the opportunity to decide about in which plural wallets a verifiable credential resides. It can be multiple wallets. And so we have this situation that we are we are having I've lost a bit with my point. No, I forgot my.
No, it's all good.
Happens rarely, but it happens.
There's probably so much good stuff in there. We need to just kind of get it back out. So I think we're going to talk in there a little bit about business models and kind of viability for decentralized identity. And Martin, then kind of going back to you on this as you remember your other. Oh, you want to go? Please go ahead. I talked for long enough.
The tiered thing, yes. I think we have the wallets. We have services that also help us dealing with the wallets, but all that is something the user is not interested in. The user is interested in what's on top of it. The health service, the travel service, the financial services, etc. This is what they are interested in. And if these things are really good, yes, they may be even willing to pay for that because this simplifies their life. Or there's a model where, okay, someone is charging for it, like we know PayPal probably is charging something because they must earn money, but the end user never sees what PayPal is charging, basically. It just happens in the background. And so, yes, these models are doable, and it's not that it hasn't been done in some way before.
Yeah, and that's a good, and I think for me, I think it's good because I think we can recognize there's maybe things that we can learn from existing systems that we can build in. But for me, it's just not nearly talked about enough. It's everyone's obsessing about wallets and the UX of that, and some of these kind of early kind of rudimentary use cases. But I'm sure we'll get to the business model element. But for me, it's like I think it should be part of this early phase much more than it currently is. Anyway, I digress. I kind of moan about that too often. Martin, you're one of the people that I think, for me, kind of shifting gears into wallets a little bit now. You speculate almost. There are a few of the talks I went to EIC last year and some of the kind of content you put out online. You speculate a lot about kind of different types of wallets. And we're starting to see these competing wallet ecosystems emerge, whether it's all the kind of different wallet consortia that's happening within Europe. I think there's 4 or 5 now, or even maybe 6, I think. And obviously some of the large major global players are starting to do their own things and experiment. Do you think this level of fragmentation of wallets is a risk to adoption, or do you think it's a good thing for adoption, that, like you said, credentials are being issued to a holder, not to a wallet, and that holder should have all this choice? But is that going to be a problem, do you think, for adoption, or a beneficial thing?
I think the biggest problem is if we emphasize too much on you must use a certain wallet, and this is the one and only wallet. I think this is probably the biggest challenge. And yes, you may say there are certain very few selected government use cases where you need a certain level of proof, and this only comes with some sort of certified wallets. But even then, that may be the wallet. But this wallet perspective, I think it fails when you look at the reality of many people. I know a lot of people who have 2 phones, a business phone and a personal phone. Oh yes, and they may do something like a loan at a bank, not necessarily using their phone. They just want to do it on their iPad, on their desktop computer, somewhere else. So everyone of us has multiple devices. So I should be able to have already from that perspective at least multiple instances of the same wallet. And then I don't believe that everything will end up in the same wallet. We probably don't want to have it, because we may say, okay, this is our wallet we use really just for things we do with the government. But we exactly don't want to have all the other stuff in that wallet, depending on where you live, how you trust your government. So we will end up with a multi-wallet world. Also personal versus organizational wallets. I think it's inevitable, and we should build for that.
Yeah, very good. I agree. It would feel like we've not done our job if we have a somewhat technical discussion or one about identity and we don't talk about AI. I think we'd be thrown off the internet for doing that. So I can't let the whole session pass without doing that. Charlie, you I know it's been talked about a lot, particularly within this industry that we're all in, but you've emphasized the importance or the way to combat the rise in AI powered fraud. And it makes, one of the antidotes to that is potentially decentralized identity and verifiable credentials. What would a trust layer built for the AI era actually look like, in your opinion? And how would that be different from some of the solutions that we currently see in the market today?
So there's probably a handful of ingredients that go into solving this, and I certainly don't confess to having figured out how to solve it. I don't know that anybody's figured that out quite yet, but for sure the sorts of things that we're starting to see right now are fakes, deep fakes. So that's a greater threat. It's threats in all sorts of accounts. I'm made to look like you, or you're able to portray something that's just not real. So we've got a few things, right? An identity verification challenge, and then we've got a content integrity challenge, right? So you've got this notion of trust. Is this content that was really written by Martin and owned by Martin, or is it something else? Is it AI generated? What's the heritage or the provenance of it? So I think infrastructure there, and I do believe this group C2PA is doing some really good work in looking at this content integrity problem. I'd say by way of identity verification, we're challenged more. Biometrics become more important. Maybe we begin to find that infrastructure where I'm not being proofed remotely, but rather being proofed in a physical manner. You go take a look at the way in which we deal with TSA or clear based infrastructure. There's some really nice anchor points out in the world where you could find that you're able to lick that problem a little bit better. And then you got this matter of ultimately saying, well, I've got a personal agent that deals with travel and another personal agent that deals with finance, and I'm integrated with or playing with lots of agents out in the world. It's not just me and Citibank. It's me, my agent, Citibank's agent, and Citi that are interacting. And we don't even have the basics down yet. And now to say we've got to get identity for agents of all types, and those the identity of those agents might be bound together with my information. So I think we've got something a bit more complex to try to deal with.
Yeah, Martin, and what's your take on that? Kind of last question before we kind of turn it into the kind of audience questions, which as usual I've been too caught up in the conversation to get into fast enough, but we will get into that. But Martin, before we do that, what's your kind of take on how identity should work for non-human actors?
Yeah, I think that we need to learn and think a lot about what I call AIdentity. So this intersection of AI and identity, because it also brings up a lot of interesting questions like the relationship. So how do things relate? There are things in like how much built-in AI safety do we need so that our agents don't go wild when they're acting on behalf of us. We need to think about learning models when an agent, so as a technical instance, runs in the context of different users. What is it allowed to put into the learning beyond the individual, and what is really private learning? And I think everyone can imagine there are things when you use an agent you don't want to have to be shared with everyone. I think that there's a lot of work to do. I'll still have to prepare my talk about AIdentity for our conference. So it's one of the topics I think a lot about. But as all of these things, we will learn how to deal with it over time. And we will also learn how to reduce the risk of deepfake attacks to an acceptable level, like we had with every type of attack.
Excellent. That's a really nice way to kind of end up and move into some of the audience questions, which we'll dig into straight away. We won't get through them all, unfortunately. But what I'd say is just to open it up, guys. If you want to answer this one quickly, then please just start talking. We should probably have some kind of buzzer system, but we don't have that. So please just jump in. So first question is Mark from Mark. Mark, thanks for asking your question. Mark's question is, as a consumer, why should I care about the concept of decentralized identity? How will it improve my life and my life experiences?
I think that would be the travel example. So when I recently traveled to Vienna, I had to register for a public transport ticket, and it wasn't easy because it then was delivered as a PDF only by mail, and so really hard to use. Because I didn't want to also register for the app. And so if I don't need to install an app for that and present it here, and then Opera, and they ask me questions about data they really don't need when I visit the Opera. So they definitely try to get way too many data. And, if you have just a few days of travel, you have so many things that are cumbersome, and we can simplify that with a sort of a smart travel app. And it might be one where we say, okay, this is the one provided by Austria when I go to Austria, and I do everything then from booking the trip to doing the trip with that app, or I have my central travel app. I don't care much about that, but I want to simplify it at least very significantly. And I think we can do a ton of things much easier. And honestly, whom of us is not annoyed by been doing something in the internet by registering again and again and again, and still being asked for username and password. Hey, we're not in the 1990s anymore. Sorry, go get rid of them.
Yeah, very good point. Actually, I think we talked a little bit about the kind of iPod moment. I think, Charlie, you were maybe bringing that up. We need this big moment in the industry to really get people engaged with it. Florin is a question, or kind of statement, I guess. He's kind of saying, can that iPod moment be the organizational wallet, like an EU business wallet, for example, where I guess rather than individuals owning and controlling wallets, maybe businesses are using that and individuals are possibly delegated to work on behalf of that organization by the organization. So would you agree with that statement, maybe, Charlie? Do you think organizational identity is the aha moment for decentralized identity, or does it have the potential to deliver that for us?
I do believe it's going along the right theme, right? I don't think there's any one right answer here, but I think it's an interesting one in the sense that you got a big base, you got enterprises that can direct people what to do and how to act in their interests. So I think it's actually it's a real interesting one.
Martin, do you have any thoughts about organizational identity? Is it something you're speaking to companies all the time?
I think we will have them as well, which again means we will have more than one wallet.
Yeah.
And yes, we need it, and we can do so many things much better. Just think about onboarding processes, and then the entire supply chain, supply chain security and the supply chain compliance, all that stuff. Know your business, etc. All these things are much easier to do.
Okay. Yeah. Greg raises a really interesting point, and I guess it's probably regulation as a barrier. And so Greg's point is he's looking for thoughts about government regulation for innovative companies, I guess, and builders. And building an app in my country, doesn't say where he's from, that utilizes cryptographic encryption techniques requires registering with an authority. And obviously, you're going to really stifle innovation potentially. What were your thoughts about that? Maybe there needs to be, I guess, minimal regulation for companies building this. But then, of course, you have that tricky issue of, are the consumers' interests being served? Does the state need to protect them? But what do you guys have? Do you have opinions about, government regulation for companies that are building this tech?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts about regulations. I think the problem is that we commonly regulate the wrong thing. Tend to regulate the wrong thing. So we tend, for instance, to say this is the technology that must be used instead of saying what do we want to achieve. So we take just a level of assurance instead of saying, okay, this is the level of assurance we need, but and we have some sort of measurement on how which defines that you have achieved it or not. But you're open, technology open here. That makes much more sense. In Germany, we have regulators that say you need to involve a human in identity verification due to the fraud risk, which is, to my opinion, total nonsense and really a fundamental misconception. What we need to measure is how good is it or how bad is it. Potentially, the machine over time will always be better than the human. Involving the human makes it just more cumbersome. It's the wrong approach. So we need to do it, really focus on what do we want to achieve and then keep it lean. So as I said, I'm from Germany, so I'm from one of the countries where we have way too much bureaucracy and way too much regulations. So being an innovator here is clearly not the easiest thing. And yes, we need the right one, so the right restrictions. And then we need to have them implemented in a reasonable manner. So my favorite is that GDPR was meant as something positive. But the impact of having all these annoying cookie consent messages means we just did it fundamentally wrong. And it doesn't achieve the target at all because most people just click allow. So it's a fundamental failure of a regulation.
Yeah, I'm also guessing regulation is probably hard as well, because quite often the people regulating are not technologists. I mean, you get things like many attempts in the UK, and I think successfully more recently, to ban encryption, which is obviously a ridiculous concept that endangers us with regards to payments and things, but was done with the intention of enabling the government looking into kind of bad guys planning nefarious things online. But obviously, you do things like that, it's really going to affect the entire population in other ways. So I sometimes wonder, Martin, if just maybe not engaging enough with industry about some of these new regulations is part of the issue here potentially as well. And that's what's causing some of the issues.
Yeah.
Final question, Michael. Michael's saying, it's a kind of statement come question. So he sees a key barrier being lack of horizontal decentralized app platform enables a developer ecosystem with many thousands of ultimately millions of players. So I'm wondering if he's talking about a kind of decentralized app store of sorts. I'm personally not sure if that's the major issue, but he makes the point, do we need a decentralized operating system platform? I'm not 100% sure what he means by that, but Charlie or Martin, do you guys have a kind of a sense of what's been talked about there?
So, very honestly, if you envision that fourth player that I was talking about earlier, that network player, you certainly might imagine that what a network player would want to do is to make it really, really easy and convenient and what I'll say compliant to bring lots of interesting apps into a community. So I think it could begin to happen that way. Try to do that without something like that, right? I don't think you get there.
All right. Well, we've reached the top of the hour. We somewhat amazingly got through most of our questions and all the audience questions, which is certainly a first for me. So I thank you very much to our esteemed guests, Charlie Walton and Martin Kuppinger, for joining us. Today we posed the question, can decentralized identity be the future of decentralized digital trust? I think we did our best to answer it. I think generally the feeling is yes, but it's maybe not happening quite as fast as we would all like, and there's certainly a lot of complexities to make all this fit together. But I hope you guys all enjoyed listening in, whether it was in person or on demand, and thanks to the audience for their questions. So I think we'll leave it there. Martin, Charlie, thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thank you, Nick. Thanks, Martin.